June of 2024, a biologist standing on the rocks at Ecola Point, just north of Cannon Beach, Oregon, watched two sea otters float in the kelp below him. Two in surf, where the state had recorded none for the better part of a century. He was not a tourist who mistook a seal. The sighting went to the Alaka Alliance, the Oregon nonprofit that has tracked these animals for years. Two otters on a coast where the last native one was shot near Otter Rock around 1906. 120 years. That is the gap. And when the animals came back, the first question was not how many, it was where they came from. The nearest breeding population sits far to the north. The genetics of Oregon's own dead otters point somewhere stranger still. To Alaska, 1,000 miles past the last place one was ever confirmed alive. Something is riding the current down the coast. The record says it cannot be here. It is here. I'm Caleb Whitlock. I've spent 22 years walking the backcountry of North America with a notebook and a DNA kit, tracking the predators the official record said were gone. And I'll tell you what the agency's carefully worded statements don't. Here is the official position. The sea otter in Hydrolutris was hunted off Oregon for the maritime fur trade until the last verified native animal was killed near Otter Rock around 1906 or 1907. Extirpated. That is the word the record uses. Gone from Oregon, full stop. And when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service finally studied bringing them back in 2022, it called reintroduction feasible, then declined to recommend it. Feasible, not recommended. Read that twice. To feel how strange the return is, you have to feel the size of what was taken. Before the fur trade, the Pacific held maybe 300,000 sea otters, one continuous population from Japan to Baja California. The pelt is the densest fur on any animal alive, and the trade wanted it more than almost anything the coast could give. By the early 1900s, the hunters had cut the entire global species down to roughly 2,000 animals, not 2,000 in Oregon, 2,000 on Earth. Oregon's share of that collapse was total. 0. This is not a single freak sighting. The two otters at Recolonising Point in 2024 were not the first. A lone male turned up near Port Orford in 2009. The researchers nicknamed him Mojo. Between 2008 and 2014, Oregon logged around 25 sightings, most of them strays. The reports never really stopped. They just never added up to a colony. One animal here, one there. A pattern nobody assembled. Hold on to Mojo. 2009, Port Orford, a single male sea otter on a stretch of Oregon coast that had not held one in 100 years. He did not bring a mate. He floated and foraged for a while, then he was gone. But he proved the thing the maps said was impossible. An otter could reach Oregon on its own. The question Mojo left behind was simple, and it drove everything after. From where? Here is where the story turns, and where most of the telling gets it wrong. In 2020, a team led by Hannah Wellman at the University of Oregon, working with Madonna Moss and Torben Rick at the Smithsonian, did something clever. They pulled DNA from the teeth of Oregon's extinct otters. 21 museum specimens collected between 1857 and 1983. Plus archaeological teeth dug up near Seaside, published in Proceedings of the Royal Society B, December 2020. One of the researchers described the trick with something close to delight. The dental calculus, she said, contains the DNA of the individual it is literally on, plus the microbes that lived in its mouth. Teeth remember. And the dead otters of Oregon were not closest to California, the population everyone assumed would reseed the coast. They were closest to the north, to Alaska, and to the Washington and British Columbia waters just below it. The Oregon otter was a northern animal. It always was. Quick, honest note, because you have heard this from other channels, and I want to be straight with you. I am not about to sell you anything. No course on tracking otters. No membership. No affiliate link waiting in the description to catch you. This channel runs on one thing: you staying to the end. And the only way I earn that is by not lying to you about what the evidence says. So when I tell you these otters are real and the source is knowable, you can check every number against the papers yourself. That is the deal. Now back to the water. So where do the living ones come from? Not a mystery once you follow the water. The nearest breeding population is on Washington's Olympic Peninsula, somewhere between 2,000 and 2,800 animals. Young male sea otters wander. They push out from the crowded core and explore hundreds of miles of coast looking for room. Females do not. That is the whole engine. Lone males drifting south from Washington, hugging the Oregon shore within about a kilometer of land, foraging in water less than 30 meters deep. The strays are Washington otters, but Washington's otters carry their own secret. That population is not native either. In 1969 and 1970, biologists moved 59 otters from Amchitka Island, Alaska, and dropped them on the Washington coast, 29 at Point Grenville, 30 at La Push. As few as 10 survived the founding. From 10 animals, a couple thousand. And every one of them, and every stray they send down to Oregon, is Alaskan stock. That is your 1,000-mile link. Not a ghost, a relay. And do not tell me 10 founders cannot rebuild a coast. California proves it. Every southern sea otter alive today, around 3,000 of them, descends from a single raft of about 50 animals that survived near Big Sur in 1938. 50 became 3,000. The math of recovery is brutal, and it is real. Now the dark part, the part the hopeful headlines skip. Oregon has done this before. In 1970 and 1971, wildlife managers took 93 to 95 otters from Amchitka, the same island, and released them on the Oregon coast. 29 went in at Cape Blanco. It should have worked. The habitat was there. A later Oregon state study put the coast's capacity near 4,500 resident otters. It failed anyway. Within a decade, the Oregon population was gone again, and nobody has ever cleanly explained why. Fish and Wildlife's own words, there is no clear-cut explanation for why the Oregon reintroduction failed, while others succeeded, and it may have just been a matter of chance. Chance. Nearly 100 otters, released into good water, simply erased. Twice now, Oregon has lost its otters. That 2022 study was not idle curiosity. Senator Jeff Merkley pushed it into law in December 2020, forcing Fish and Wildlife to answer whether otters could come home to Oregon and Northern California. Feasible, they said. Then they stopped short of recommending it, because reintroduction is not a clean win to everyone. 2 Washington tribes oppose it. Shellfish crews fear what an otter does to a Dungeness crab bed and a razor clam flat. An otter eats a quarter of its body weight a day. That is the honest cost the hopeful side does not like to say out loud. And here is the straight answer to the question a careful skeptic would throw at me. Is Oregon actually being recolonized? No, not yet, and maybe not for a long time. A handful of wandering males is not a comeback. It is visits. A coast gets recolonized by females and pups and resident rafts holding ground, and the females are still up in Washington, staying put. The title says Recolonizing. The record says something narrower and truer. They are knocking on the door. No one has opened it. So it ends where it began. On the rocks at Ecola Point, with 2 otters floating in the kelp below a coast that spent 120 years without them. Bob Bailey of the Alaka Alliance, the group named for Alaka, the Chinookan word for sea otter, puts it plainly. Sea otters, he says, do not just live in the kelp forest. They make it possible. In January 2025, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz received $1.56 million to plan a real return. And the fight over it is already on. But tonight, none of that reaches the 2 animals at Cannon Beach. They are Alaskan by blood and Washington by road, and they are foraging in Oregon water the way their kind did before the fur ships came. Not recolonizing. Not yet. Just back. 1 male at a time. Waiting on the females who have not come. If you had been standing on that headland and seen them in the surf, tell me whether Oregon should bring them home for good or leave the coast to decide on its own. I read every comment.